Hey Bellingham, this is Zac Palmer with Fitness Gear and Training and 30 Minute Fit. I want to take a moment today to really explain who we are, what we do, our approach, and what I believe really makes us the best at what we do. So in my mind's eye, we have 7 major elements to any balanced wellness program. And that's one precedent that I like to set early on is, yes, we are a fitness facility, but we tend to approach things much more from a holistic sustainability standpoint. It's not any one area of fitness or wellness, but how symbiotic and or synergistic each of these areas can be and or are. So each of those areas are elements. We have our weight training or resistance training, our cardiovascular fitness and conditioning, balance, flexibility, and recovery, nutrition, hydration, sleep, and everything centers around the psychology of wellness, which for those of you that know me, that's a major area of study, an area where I put a lot of focus. More specifically, what I like to study is behavioral psychology. Initially, it was because I wanted to know why. Why is it that people do the things they do? And if I had to grossly categorize 3 groups of people, I could say there are the people that implement and create a fitness or wellness habit that they sustain and maintain for the rest of their life. There's the majority of us who kind of tend to yo-yo or ping pong in and out. I like to joke, we all know somebody that's lost 100 pounds, right? 10 pounds, 10 times over and over and over again. And then there's people that never set their foot in the door to begin with. What I came to realize is it's not really why, but it's how. How is it that we're able to establish habits, patterns, and rituals that can serve us in one or multiple areas of our life while we can simultaneously self-sabotage in others? But for our purposes today, I'm going to start with one thing. And that one thing is why. Or more specifically, what are your long-term or sustainable motivators? Because as you can probably imagine, a lot of people, a fair number of people, come to us because it's New Year's, it's summer and they want to be beach body ready, it's wedding season, they want to look good in their dress or make sure they fit in their dress. I'm always like, that's fantastic. I'm glad that was the catalyst that brought you through the door. But I genuinely encourage people to take a step back and really look for those loftier motivators. What's going to help encourage and motivate you to make wellness as important a part of your everyday life as getting out of bed, brushing your teeth, having breakfast, and so on. But at the same time, I think it's really important to mention that it's not about perfection. It's not even about moderation. It's just about being constantly mindful of each of these areas and how they can work for or potentially against each other. Now, something else that I frequently see is a disconnect. And that disconnect in most cases lies between an individual's wants and goals versus what their actual needs and necessities are. How do I mean that? Number one, today we are bombarded in the media with beautiful faces and hard bodies, and I find that people frequently have these idealized versions of themselves that aren't really themselves. And the way we look at it, if you're trying to be somebody else, you're always going to be second place. So our goal ultimately is to create the best version of you. So where does that start? Ultimately, we've got 2 key considerations. One is body type. So we know from a gross fundamental scientific level, we can generally categorize 3 body types: ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph, small, medium, and large. Or what I like to look at is kind of like your long and lean runner-like build, your more intermediate build like me, or big, broad Farmer John, the linebacker, right? And then from there, we all have varying innate abilities or strengths, varying abilities to put on muscle, variances in our endurance, our lipid metabolism or fat burn, our cardiovascular endurance, our aerobic endurance, anaerobic endurance. The list goes on and on and on. So it's important to determine A, your body types, B, your body's innate abilities or strengths, and then while being mindful of any contraindications, imbalances, past injuries, or what have you, we structure and maximize your training around those things to create the best version of you. And ultimately what that comes down to is trust. Trusting us that we are very good at what we do, and we are very good at what we do. But I always say equally, if not infinitely more important, is learning to trust and, this is a good word, enjoy the process. I like to joke all the time. It takes a while to get to where we don't want to be. Takes a while to get to where we do want to be, but particularly if we're going to do it in a healthy and sustainable way. And that's the trouble with most programs today, is they're just not sustainable. Now, one other thing I like to point out, because I'm sure you would agree, most people tend to combine or altogether neglect one or multiple areas of wellness for another. Like Guys frequently like to hit the weights, right? But maybe struggle with the cardio. The yogi might be able to put their foot behind their head, but struggles with their sleep. There's usually one or multiple areas of imbalance when it comes to our wellness. But one I like to address up front is the combination of these two, of weight training and cardiovascular fitness and conditioning. Now, I've got ideas where some of these misconceptions came from, so we won't name names today, but the main point is there's this common myth where they're like, cardio, what's cardio, bro? You get that through your resistance training. Well, what they don't really realize they're talking about is anaerobic endurance versus cardiovascular fitness and conditioning. While the systems are interconnected, they need to be trained and addressed independent of the other to maximize the results, value, and overall outcome. One can actually become a deterrent or detractant if not structured properly. So I like to point that out from a simple form of clarity in the beginning. Cardio is different than your resistance training. It needs to be addressed and approached as such. Okay, everybody clear? Cool. Now, where do we start? Initially, in the very beginning, we start with the weight training or resistance training. Number of reasons for this. One, nobody wants to pay us an hourly rate to watch them run on a treadmill, right? So we can help with cardiovascular homework and conditioning. But I like to illustrate some of the value here with a little bit of science. So recent studies have shown that a pound of muscle burns roughly the equivalent of 50 calories. Do I know that my pound of muscle burns the same as your pound of muscle? No, but we know it's somewhere in that vicinity. So let's pretend I'm magic for a second, okay? And I could snap my fingers and add 10 pounds of lean body mass to your system. And ladies, don't worry, I'm not trying to turn you into the Hulk or anything, okay? We're just trying to illustrate a point here, right? So what that 10 pounds now does, it's now burning 500 calories. If we take those, multiply them by the 7 days of the week, we're now burning 3,500 calories, which we know is the equivalent to 1 pound of fat. So that's one of the ultimate goals behind weight training and resistance training. Increase the body's own natural efficiency to get rid of that fluffy stuff that we don't want around. And that's great, but what's equally, if not even more valuable than that? Improving our usable functional strength, the stuff that we use to do all the stuff that we want to do, would like to be able to do again, be able to do more enjoyably or maybe pain-free. We help stabilize any hypermobilized joints, alleviate any back pain, correct any imbalances. There's a lot of other benefits that come through resistance training that most people don't tend to think about. So we gotta think about how it's gonna impact you on the day-to-day. Now, moving on. What happens? Where does most people go wrong? Right now, we are down here at body A, okay? And we want to get up to body B, or what I like to look at as your happiest, healthiest version of you, right? Now, most people start down here at body A. They start working up toward that happier, healthier version of themselves until somewhere along the way, boom, this happens. They hit a plateau. And what happens to most people when they hit these plateaus? They're like, why am I wasting all this time exercising if I'm not getting the results I want? And boom, it's back to the beginning of the end. That's most people in my observation. I always like to pose the question, why do we hit these plateaus? There are countless reasons why you can and will hit these plateaus. Unfortunately, the majority of which are self-imposed. But there are some that I like to refer to as periods of physiological adaptation prior to the body hitting a tipping point and falling back into forward progress. It's like a lot of people give up right before they were about to crest the hill. So sometimes it's just time, patience, and trust in the process. But more often than not, it's one or some combination of things that we're doing. There are way, way, way too many things for me to illustrate, so I like to touch on one that allows me to touch on a few more really important and valuable points, which is relative to your workout structure. So most people, using a 3-day-a-week model as an example. Here's our Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and here's week 1, and here's week 2. Most people go to the gym. It's workout A on Monday, workout B on Wednesday, workout C on Friday. Week 2 comes around, workout A on Monday, workout B. That's more rhyme, reason, structure, function than the average person employs. Like, walk into any gym. Guarantee you, there's a group of dudes working out in front of the mirror, working the glamour muscles, they're hitting the chest, abs, biceps, and then they have stork leg syndrome because they forgot they have legs. Ladies, it's like, oh, my butt's a little bit lower than it used to be, I'll do some squats, got these bingo arms, maybe I'll hit the triceps. There's not generally a lot of rhyme, reason, structure, function. But what do we know about the body on the other hand? The body is a very efficient mechanism. And what that body is very efficient at doing is adapting to environmental change. So if we do that same workout day in and day out, week after week, month after month, year after year, the body adapts, accommodates, and overall growth or benefit stops. So we might leave the same general structure the same. We might change a component as simple as an exercise. We might change something like the number of repetitions, the amount of weight we're lifting. We might change one of the exercises. We might change all of the exercises. But the key is we utilize something called a planned or periodized training structure. And in my professional opinion, this is one of the most important and most often overlooked and neglected components of a properly structured training program. Why? Because the term that it's playing on, or that it parallels, is a term called muscle confusion. It's exactly what we're just talking about. We got to keep the body guessing. But like anything, there is a balance to it. See, most programs today, you got the WOD, the workout of the day, or the instructor's making up the program on the spot. What's the value in that? You get a little more variety. But the problem is you now eliminate your base for measurement, your foundation. So by utilizing a periodized protocol where you're doing the same or at least similar versions of exercises with the appropriate changes in structure, and what I mean by that is, if I had to break it down really simplistically, we've got 3 training zones. We have our endurance range, that high intensity spit in your face, yell in your ear, go, go, go type range. You have the hypertrophic range, which all the guys love because that's where we're putting on the muscle. And then we've got the strength and power range. Those quick, explosive power movements are things where you got to lift that heavy boulder off for somebody, right? Something like that. So we got to have that element of structure and balance. But the other side is with the periodized structure, by repeating, repetition is the mother of skill, you can now see where you're making the gains in strength, balance, dexterity, movement performance, movement dynamics, etc. And right about the time the body needs it, switch it up and move on to the next evolution. It's a much more appropriate balance between form and function, between variety and the certainty that you create by knowing that you're improving in any one or multiple different categories. It's more systematic, it's more strategic, it's scientifically based, and I guarantee you it's going to get better results. So periodized training is important. It's imperative, actually. The next thing is being progressive. What do I mean by that? One, when you first start with us, I don't want you so sore you can't get out of bed for the first few weeks. It's not good for you, it's not fun, it's not motivating, there is no physiological benefit to doing it, right? Not many people like the thought of needing a lift to get themselves off the toilet. So there's no need to go there, okay? We got to develop that base conditioning first. But another component of progression, for me, is about creating the appropriate foundation. What I mean by that is I like to look at the body like a house, right? You try and build a house without a proper foundation, that house is not going to last very long. And the human body is no different, but just in a slightly different context. So I'll never forget the moment that where and when I became aware of this concept. I was flying back from San Diego. I'm in the San Diego airport. I hop on the escalator, and the way my brain works, I'm kind of a nightmare to take to public places because the way my mind works, I'm constantly analyzing bodies, right? And not in a judgmental context, but a therapeutic context. It's just like when I walk into an open room, my brain starts designing a gym. So I'm in the airport, I'm on the escalator, and I'm behind this couple, and he's like 6'7" and she's like 5'0", right? And I remember tuning into my brain as it's having this own little conversation as we step off the escalator, and it's going, oh, he's got drop shoulder, pronation of the feet, anterior tilt of the pelvis, and my head starts going through corrective exercises. All of a sudden it dawns on me. It clicks. And I start looking around the airport and I'm going, whoa, this is a really accurate representation of the American populace as a whole. And these are the people that are jumping into these high intensity programs without ever having gone through any type of thorough health history, which, mind you, ours are 5 pages. Most programs, you go in, you sign a liability waiver, and you're off to the races. Trainers know nothing about you, pack mentality takes over, people start sacrificing form for function. The key point is, if you try and build on a foundation that's already broken, you're either going to exacerbate pre-existing injuries or imbalances, which you probably have, and or you're going to create new ones altogether. So it's really important that we bring the body back to center while we build it up. We're going for longevity and sustainability, not results in the moment, okay? What else? We're really big on functional movements, but more specifically, usable functional movements. These are those exercises that in some way, shape, or form replicate your day-to-day activities, movements, sports, or things you enjoy. Simply put, the body likes it better, there's a lower risk of training lower risk of injury when you're training, which also translates to day-to-day life, and you're gonna get better results. So functional exercise, usable functional exercise, is imperative. Now, the last few things. These are some that are pretty unique and I'm really proud of as a facility, I would say. So one is an integral part of all the programs. We teach a series of core stabilization exercises. Why do we do that? Well, two reasons. One, statistically, 80% of Americans are going to suffer from chronic back pain at some point or another. So it kind of seemed like a no-brainer, right? The other reason, for those of you that don't know my story, I'm actually legally disabled. I have herniated discs in my back. I had back surgery 14 years ago. I found out recently that a particular region of my lumbar spine is naturally fused. I literally had days, weeks, months, years I couldn't bathe myself, dress myself, anything. And these exercises were the same ones post-surgery that I had to do to retrain the muscles to fire at their full potential again. Most of you are not activating them, and they're a really great protective mechanism. But for those of you that are, a lot of you don't know how to properly deactivate them, which is equally as important. So we've got to learn to train and take control of these core stabilizers so we can help to protect the body. Now, the last two things. One, a collaborative environment. I joke all the time. You walk into a gym, sign up with a trainer, and you're victim to the sole input and expertise of that individual, good, bad, or ugly. Reality is, hiring practices are really lax today. You don't have to have a certification to call yourself a trainer, to be insured as a personal trainer. A lot of gyms even have their own videos where it's like, hey Wyatt, plug this video in, congratulations, you are a certified trainer today. Point is, I require all of our trainers to have a base NFPT certification or something comparable of the reputable certifying bodies, and then I look for people that complement our ideologies and philosophies, but then equally as important to me that I can learn from. We all meet on a twice weekly basis, talk about what's working well in the programs, what's not, what we can do to better any one individual. Key point, multiple fields of input, best possible outcome. When you're working with us, you're not just working with one of us, you're working with all of us. And the last piece, on that same note, is leadership. And how I mean that is, ironically, what I require for somebody to work with us in the beginning is also what I believe becomes most trainers' greatest limitation, which is their education. Because I mentioned before, we have multiple reputable certifying bodies, like somewhere in the neighborhood of a dozen today. And that doesn't even account for sub-certifications, unique specializations, independent studies, all of which can and frequently do have different thoughts, theories, conjecture, or supporting science relative to the same subjects. So what I chose to do is study them all, because my whole belief is when we can take knowledge and intellect and pair that with time-earned wisdom and experience, that the marriage of the two is what allows us to create the best experience. But I took it a little bit further, and I decided to complete doctorate level medical terminology so I could communicate on a clinical level with other healthcare practitioners. I had the opportunity to understudy with physical therapists by invitation. I had an athletic training background. I'm a level 1, level 2 certified kinesiotaping technician. The list goes on and on. But I also believe that knowledge is not power. It's potential power. I could have all this beautiful stuff rattling around in my brain up here, but if I don't know how to employ it to your benefit, then it's not going to do any good. So those are some of the things that really make us unique and that we leverage to ensure that we are keeping you moving up towards that happiest, healthiest version of you. There's one more piece to bring the whole thing together. I call it my Woody the Woodpecker philosophy. Okay? So hopefully most of you guys are old enough to remember Woody the Woodpecker. If you're not, there was a great cartoon. He was this obnoxious woodpecker that would fly around, had this goofy laugh, peck you on the head, that kind of stuff, right? So what's the purpose behind my Woody the Woodpecker philosophy? I'm going to go to my gym analogy for a second. So typically, generally speaking, you walk into a gym and you're going to sign up with a trainer. Now, I think more often than not, trainers have the right intentions, but there's many things that tend to prevent them from creating the best experience. One of which, the average tenure of a trainer in the industry is only 2 years. So if you haven't noticed, we have a really saturated market that's being diluted with inexperienced people. And everybody's got to start somewhere, but that's just something to be mindful of, right? So what the average trainer is going to do, they're going to sit down, they're going to be like, all right, Jane, I want you to sign on the dotted line, commit to X number of days a week with me, commit to X number of days of cardiovascular homework, go on X, Y, and Z calorie restricted diet, drink this much water, get this much sleep, do this much stretching, do all this stuff. And then what happens? life happens. And when life happens, what's the first thing to go for most people? One or everything up here on the whole wheel of wellness, right? So what my philosophy became is pick your power. And the thing that we like to start with is the thing that we have the most direct impact and influence over, that weight training or resistance training. And simply put, the whole idea is for us to create that habit. But more importantly, until that habit transcends into a lifestyle or ritual. And all the while, like Woody the Woodpecker, we're sitting on your shoulder planting the seeds of change for making any updates to your nutrition, your sleeping habits, your hydration, whatever's next and most relevant to you. And when the time is right, it will all fall into place. Because what I realize is we learn from our failures, but we build on our successes. So you start to create momentum in any one area, the brain will start naturally going, all right, this feels pretty good. What can I do now? What can I do now? We slowly stack. It's about progress, not perfection. And that is what creates the opportunity for sustainable life changes. I'm Zac Palmer with Fitness Gear and Training in 30 Minute Fit.